And so you can kind of see how all of the content kind of links back to each other. So every time you're interacting with me, I'm giving you value, but I'm also telling you, and if you want more value, here's another place to go.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klinck proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klinck.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 55 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klinck, and today's show is one I'm really excited for. Now, we're continuing the theme of content strategy, and today's episode is all about transparency. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through my content strategy that it's some of what I've already had in place, but it's also a strategy I've been working on developing with an expert to really kind of put all the pieces together. I'm going to tell you why I made the decisions I did, but also kind of explain what those decisions are so you'll have a full sense of it. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I know that often hearing people talk about how to develop a strategy, how to develop this, how to do that, can be a bit hard to really kind of put together and figure out until you hear a concrete example. And so I figured that walking through what I'm doing, what my plan is, and the reasons behind those decisions would help you to kind of get your mind around the concept of developing a content strategy. And again, it helps that I put this together with the help of an expert. So you know that I'm not, that I kind of know what I'm doing and I've got a really good base for it. And you'll hear some things in this episode that may apply to you. You may have to tweak them, obviously, because they're not going to exactly apply to your business, but you'll get some lessons along the way. Before we dive in, though, this week's episode, as always, is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. Again, this is my free private Facebook group where you can get in there and we can go deeper on the issues we talk about in the podcast. We talk about the legal issues, the marketing issues, and everything in between. You'll get some live trainings, resources, Q&A sessions, the ability to ask me questions to really help to build and protect your amazing business. Now, there are other great things that happen in that group. You'll have members help each other, so it's not just me helping. Just this week, we had someone posting and trying to find people to help her do some ICA research. So those are the kinds of things that happen in the group. And if you think about it, it's a group of engaged online entrepreneurs who are looking to do business the right way, and they're in it for the long haul. So it's a group of people you really want to be around. Now, it's absolutely free, and you can join by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community, and you can join the community on Facebook. Just make sure you answer the questions. That's kind of my one requirement to get in. So now let's dive in to today's episode. Now, I'm going to explain what my overall approach to content is and kind of how it fits in and how I then kind of nurture people, etc. And along the way, I'm going to be talking about why I made the choices I did and how they're sometimes a bit different from other people's. Now, some of those times where they're different, you may not need to employ them. Other times you may say, hey, that's a good idea, and I'm going to try to implement that in my business. But before we dive into the content strategy, we need to start by talking about what I sell. Now, you'll remember in episode 47 where I was talking about laying kind of the groundwork or the framework for your business. One of the things we talked about is you need to think through what you sell and how you're going to sell it before you can really come up with your overall marketing plan. And your content plan is part of your marketing plan, so you really have to have thought this through and understand this to come up with your content strategy. So with that in mind, to really understand my strategy, you need to understand what I sell. Now, hopefully you have some sense, but if you don't, I sell only one thing. I sell legal templates. Now, I sell them a couple of different ways. I have my standard individual templates that you can buy year round anytime. And those are sold, pretty much through nurture sequences or people finding a sales page, etc. There's no big push to sell those except through promotions. For example, during Black Friday, there will be a promotion here and there and things like that. But largely those are things that are happening kind of on evergreen on their own through my general marketing and general lead generation process. The other way that I sell those templates is through my template library, which I launch periodically through the year. It's only open limited times. And what that is someone can get access to all of my templates now and in the future for one price. You pay now and then you've got it forever. So that's what I sell and that's how I sell it. The template library goes through a launch phase. There's going to be webinars and all those things as I'm ramping it up. I've gone through one series of launch and preparing for the second as I record this. But the idea is you get a sense. I sell legal templates. They're all about written agreements, written policies, those types of things. And that's important because that shapes what it is that is part of my content strategy. So with that background, let's dive in to how I develop my content strategy and what's part of it. So the first step for me was defining my content hubs. Now, again, a few episodes ago in episode 52, where I was talking about developing a content strategy, you'll remember I talked about using a hub and spoke model. And my view is that the hub and spoke model applies to a lot of different pieces for the pieces of your content strategy. It applies to the what, meaning what you're going to talk about. It applies to the where you're going to host it. And then it also applies to how, how are you going to deliver it? So in some sense, the hub and spoke comes up multiple times, but the first piece for me is always the what. That's always where I'm going to start before I figure out how am I going to deliver it, where am I going to put it, et cetera. I've got to know, well, what am I going to be putting out there? What is the content I'm going to create? Now, there are a lot of things I could be talking about when it comes to legal stuff. And there are questions that people ask me that, are part of the legal stuff. But when I was thinking about my overall content strategy, I wanted to be cognizant and I wanted to make sure that my hubs, so my content hubs, when I think about what are the big pillars of content I'm going to create, they needed to have some kind of connection to the products I sell, to templates. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be something where the content is selling it. In fact, if you've been listening to this podcast very long, you've probably noticed that I don't ever really try to sell my forms directly to you on this podcast. In fact, as I'm thinking about it, this is one of the few times on this podcast that I've even mentioned that I sell legal templates. I just don't, use it as part of my content on a regular basis. Now, some of the times I may do that in the future, but that's not what I mean. I don't mean that my content has to be me pushing and promoting every time. The point simply is that the content I'm creating should be attracting people who would be interested in topics that would have some connection to the things I sell and to my overall business ecosystem. So think about it that way. I just want to be thinking about who am I going to attract with this content and who am I going to be able to nurture with this content. So it's not just attracting, but it's attracting and then nurturing your customers. And so with that in mind, I worked with a content strategist and we came up with 6 different hubs. The first hub is setting up your business. Now, you'll remember that was one of the first themes we did once we transitioned into this theme. We talked about the basic beginning parts of your business, and some of that has to do with legal stuff, but a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it has to do with, hey, let's set up your business. And when you're thinking about setting up your business, what do you need to be doing, et cetera? And I actually got an email or a note from someone after they heard me on another podcast that I'm going to work into this setting up your business, that the legal stuff is part of going from I'm a person with an idea for an online course, for example, to I am a business owner. That's part of the mindset shift you have to make, and the legal is part of that. So you can kind of see how what I do fits in there. The next content hub is your website. Your website is an important part of your business. You need to get it set up for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of different pieces there. And also there are legal components to it. Again, in last week's episode, I don't sell anything about ADA compliance, but we talked about ADA compliance on your website. And then there are links to my legal templates because there are legal policies you need for your website. So again, you can see how it's a topic that people care about. It's a topic that there are a lot of things to talk about, and it relates to my content. Then the next content hub is creating content. That's where we are today. That's where we've been in this latest theme of content creation. Obviously, there's a lot to cover here. And then there are a lot of legal issues to talk about as part of it. Again, a lot of the content creation stuff is interesting. It's things that you're going to care about. And then there are a lot of pieces that you might need along the way. So the next content hub is, broadly speaking, working with clients, students, and customers. So it's got to think about ways that you're making money by directly serving clients. So it could be a one-on-one client. It could be a one-on-one coaching client. It could be having an online course. It could be an online membership, those kinds of program systems, et cetera. But the ways of making money directly by serving your people. That's an area that obviously a lot of people want to know about. They want to know, how can I do that? How can I build those businesses? How can I make money doing those things? And there are legal issues and there are written agreements that need to be put in place. So again, it all fits in to my overall strategy. The next content hub is marketing your business. Okay, once you've got all this done, how are you going to actually get out there and market your business? How are you going to get people to come in? This could be Facebook advertising. It could be social media marketing. It could be, paid marketing. It could be doing challenges. It could be doing webinars. It could be all of those different things. And that's an important piece because you need to know how to do that. Obviously, once you create a product, it's great, but you need to know how to get it out to the world. So it's something my audience is going to care about. And then there are links back to things that you might need. For example, testimonials, raise issues that you might need a written agreement for, and things like that. So again, it fits in to my overall content strategy, my overall business ecosystem. And then the last content hub, is a bit amorphous. It's a bit kind of miscellaneous, but we called it making money online. And so this is things other than, directly serving clients, customers, et cetera. So think affiliate relationships. Think of those kinds of other ways you can make money that we often do to supplement our income. And those things are important. People love them. People like hearing about those because once you get to the point that you've built up an audience, built up a tribe, you want to be thinking about, hey, how can I serve them better? And part of that is if you only have a product that they can use every once in a while, you may have other products that other people produce that you think would work for them. And so it kind of falls into that area. It's a useful piece of content. And it's also, again, there are legal things to be thinking about there as well. So those are the content hubs: setting up your business, your website, creating content, clients, students, and customers, marketing your business, and then making money online. Now let's talk through why those are all good topics for my content. Now, first of all, at a basic level, all of those are topics that I actually love thinking about, digging into, and talking about. And you may say, well, why in the world does that matter? Well, because that way I'll show up for them. And I do believe that your content strategy, part of it needs to be that it needs to be things that you're interested in. Because if you're not interested in the stuff, you're not actually going to want to talk about it. You're not actually going to want to dive deep, whether it's writing a blog post, doing a podcast, whatever it is, you're not going to want to spend the time on it. And that's going to be a problem. So it's got to be something you actually enjoy. So that's part of it for me. Now, these are also topics that my ideal customers are interested in, right? They want to know about, kind of how do I get things started? How do I create a website? What do I do on the content marketing side? How do I actually make money? All of these things are things they are thinking about. And because they're thinking about them, they're things that can attract my ideal customer to me. There are obviously topics with legal angles and with tie-ins to my legal templates. So, some of the times I'll talk about legal issues here that aren't necessarily about the legal templates. For example, in setting up your business, one of the issues that comes up is naming issues. And I did a whole podcast about naming issues. I don't offer that service. That's not something that I sell to people, but it is information that they need. So it has a legal angle, but then there are also tie-ins to my legal templates that I sell, which makes it useful for my overall ecosystem. Now, the other piece of why these are good is because there's lots of great topics to talk about within each one of these hubs. In other words, I can create loads of content under these 6 hubs without running out of ideas. In episode 52, where I talked about creating a content strategy, you'll remember, I talked about basically kind of listing the content hubs and then doing a brain dump. Well, I did that. I did that on these hubs, and I easily came up with 6 months worth of content on these issues. And if you think about it, these aren't issues where I'm necessarily talking about legal stuff on a regular basis. There was a whole separate task on the legal work where I did another brain dump, but this was just saying, hey, what are some topics I can talk about? For example, I came up with the idea of, hey, how do you create a content strategy? That was one of the topics that I came up with. But then obviously, you're going to hear some episodes coming up in the content creation theme that have to do with SEO, with blogging, with podcasting, with all of these different things. So there's so much to talk about. You just get the idea that I was able to say, no problem. I can map out a content strategy for 6 months or more without having to break a sweat. So that was an important piece of the puzzle as well. Now, this is a place I want to talk about where I'm a bit different than a lot of people because I'm using what's called a Trojan horse content strategy here on the podcast. And what that means is you'll notice, obviously, a lot of the episodes, I'm not talking about the legal stuff. For example, in this episode, you're not going to hear me talk about the legal stuff again, except to say I sell legal templates and that's part of my strategy. The reason why I did that is that people probably wouldn't show up week after week to listen to legal lessons. Now, I want to be clear. I'm fun and I kind of make the legal stuff enjoyable and easy to understand. And actually, this past summer, I did a whole series where I did some deep dives on issues and people loved those. And so, there is some episodes that are all about the legal stuff. But the reality is I know the legal stuff isn't sexy, right? I mean, it's not something that people show up for and say, yay, I want to deal with this stuff. In fact, one of my customers who did a testimonial for me said, that the legal stuff is normally not something she wants to handle, and it ranks up there with scooping poop in her to-do list. And I get that. And so because of that, I know that I'm not likely to build a huge audience and a huge tribe of people who are going to come to me every week to listen to legal lessons. And by that, I mean a full podcast, 45 minutes of legal lesson. I mean, that's something that people just wouldn't want to do. That being said, I think it's important and people do need to get some legal lessons here and there. So what I do, like I said, is a Trojan horse strategy. I sell people what they want, and I'm not even talking about selling, but my content is selling them something they want, but then I give them what they need. So I talk about the marketing stuff. In my marketing efforts and my emails, I try to be a little bit fun and cheeky and make fun of myself and lawyers. And all of that is to keep this interesting, keep it fun, keep it light. And then I slip in the legal stuff as an adjunct, right? So people are listening to me on a regular basis, and some episodes they hear some legal lessons mixed in with the marketing stuff. Some episodes are mainly about the legal stuff, kind of like last week where we talked about ADA compliance for your website. And so, that's what I'm doing. If you sell something that's sexy, right? If your products, if your overall, what you're helping with people with is something that is fun or sexy, or that people would show up for week after week to hear about, you're probably not going to use the Trojan horse strategy. You're going to be talking directly about what you do. Now, again, An example of this is Amy Porterfield and her podcast. She, it's broader than the thing she offers, but she sells things that are going to help you make money, how to build your list, how to create digital courses, how to sell them. So those things are things that are in themselves sexy. So she gets to kind of talk about what she does directly, whereas I talk about those same things as a Trojan horse, right? As a way to bring you in to what I actually sell. So that's kind of an example of where I'm different. And if you're selling something that is sexy and people want, you don't have to do that. But if you are in a market like mine, where what you're selling people is a preventative thing, not something that they're necessarily going to want to think about all the time, the Trojan horse strategy is something that can work. And using my model of kind of what I'm doing is something that might help you along the way. So that's kind of the first step. What are my hubs? What are my content, et cetera? What is the what, in a sense, of what's going to be involved in my content strategy? The next piece was figuring out where my hub was going to be. And this may seem like a weird question to ask because most people would think, well, it's going to be their website, right? That's where you're going to post your content. Maybe if it's a blog, that's where you're going to try to get the SEO juice and all those things. And, all of those different issues. And what I'll say is my content definitely goes on my website. There's no question about that. But I decided that wasn't going to be my kind of standalone hub. And instead, I decided to make my Facebook group a central part of my hub and spoke model. Now, again, for a while now, you've probably, heard that I mention the Online Genius podcast community at the beginning and the end of every episode here. That's because that's where I'm driving people. That's where I want the hub to be. I drive people there from a lot of different places, not just from the podcast, but in my email marketing, their emails about it from, all of these different places that I connect with people. I try to drive people there. And, let me talk about why I made that decision. There are a lot of benefits to having a Facebook group, and you can do this in other groups as well. But, Facebook is what naturally made sense to me. Part of it is it creates an environment where I can actually interact with people. And one of the things that I have found from interviewing my customers is that the interaction with me, my availability, the fact that I'm there to answer questions is one of the things that kind of pushes them over the top. It's one of the huge benefits that they see in buying from me, because they're actually getting to interact with me to get questions answered, etc. So I know that that's one of my differentiators. That's one of the things that makes me a blue ocean. And so having a Facebook group where that can happen is a natural decision to be made. The next piece is, quite honestly, it's where most of the people that I'm marketing and selling to already are. I do a lot of marketing and advertising on Facebook, so a lot of the people who find me through Facebook. And so having that as my hub, in a sense, is natural, because it kind of is a way that people can get my content, hear from me, etc., where they already live. They don't have to decide to type in www.youronlinegenius.com to find me. No, when they're on Facebook, they potentially find me, see content from me, etc. So it's kind of a way to use where they already are to enter their conversation where they are to my advantage. Now, the other reason I decided to do this is it is a way that I can reach people beyond my email list. In other words, it's another forum where if I'm doing a promotion, I can put posts, I can do lives, I can do all of those things to reach people who aren't, for example, opening email. Or if people don't want to be on my email list, but they're willing to be in my Facebook group or things like that, it's another touch point where I'm able to connect with them. If I didn't have my Facebook group, I wouldn't have that option. I mean, yes, you have a Facebook page, but you just don't get any engagement or any reach on a Facebook page. So that's not really a useful place to do it. So, but a Facebook group is different. You can still get a little bit of traction there. So it's part of that. Now, I do want to say, though, that a Facebook group isn't for everyone. It requires more work, and I'm working to get even more work into mine because quite honestly, you've got to go in there on a regular basis. There have to be posts on a regular basis. There has to be interaction. There has to be engagement. If there's not, there's a couple of things. One, I mean, I'm in some Facebook groups where literally the person who heads it, started it with this idea that they were going to do a lot of, extras, et cetera, and then they don't. And the only thing they ever do in there is promote. Well, I leave those groups. So you can't do that. You can't use your Facebook group as a place where you're just promoting. It has to be a place for questions and answers and interactions and engagements, et cetera. And I'm working on upping that in the group here, but you've got to be willing to do that. And part of that means you need to be able to be ready to create more info than just your regular weekly content. Now, you could do it just as kind of, interacting with people, engaging with people, et cetera. But if you have another layer of content you can provide to people other than whatever your weekly, kind of pillar posts or blog posts or podcast, et cetera, that's going to be kind of the gold mine because it's a way to go deeper, to give them more, to get them more connected. Again, it's another reason for them to be in your group and to check in on a regular basis. So that's part of why it's not always great for everyone, but if you're willing to put in the work, I think it's a great idea. Now, I do want to be clear about things. I don't use the fact that I have a Facebook group as an excuse not to be building my list. I don't own Facebook. You don't own Facebook. So I'm not going to rely upon it being there and being available to me. My goal is always to get as many touch points and ways to contact people as possible. So if you're in my group, you'll see that often I'm trying to lead people to grab some freebies for me. And I'll be honest, when I first launched this Facebook group a while back, it was before it was kind of thought of as a community or podcast community. But when I first launched it, I was thinking, well, I'll just put all my freebies. Once you're in the group, you can have all the freebies, have them as files. And then someone pointed out to me, that's a mistake because you want to make sure that people who are in the group also have a reason to get on your email list. And so I'm always trying to direct people, again, not with sales, but saying, hey, have you joined my Online Genius Academy, which is my training portal? And I give them a link where they can join. The idea is let's build an ecosystem where they're in my Facebook group, but they're also on my email list and they're also connecting with me in other ways. So the idea is let's use the Facebook group as an additional layer of connection, not the primary layer of connection. So that's kind of how you can see how it fits into the overall ecosystem where I'm connecting with people on multiple levels. So that's the where. The where is that the Facebook group is largely becoming the hub. Again, I use my website. It's got all the content, but I know that a lot of people would prefer, and it's going to be easier to get people to look at stuff in a Facebook group. So that's why I'm using that. So the final kind of big step is thinking through the how. How is I going to deliver the content? Now, obviously, this podcast is my primary delivery method. This is where I put a ton of focus. It's my long form medium where I deliver long form content to people. I love it for a few different reasons. One, it's much easier for me to get on and create a podcast, meaning I can crank out an hour-long podcast from, thinking it through, outlining it, coming up with resources, thinking through how I'm going to talk about it, and then actually recording it. I can do that faster than I could crank out a blog post each week because creating a blog post is still something, I do a lot of writing in my business, and as a lawyer, I did even more writing. But it's something that I find, a bit tedious at times. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist at times. Whereas with the spoken word, I'm comfortable once I have an outline, once I know what I'm going to say, wind me up and let me go and I'll do it. As a lawyer, that's obviously a skill I had to have. I had to be able to speak on my feet, et cetera. And so it's something I'm very comfortable doing. When I do interviews, I'm very comfortable interviewing people because it's, again, a skill I picked up from being a lawyer. So I enjoy those things. So that's part of it, is that I enjoy it. And that's important because you want it to be something you'll do. But also I love it because people feel connected with me because they hear my voice. So they're not just reading my words, and I can try to put, some character into my words. And I'm trying to do that obviously a lot more with my emails these days. But in a blog post, it would be hard for me to really get my personality through, I think. Whereas, people listen to this and they feel like they know me. So when I meet people often or talk to them on the phone, they feel like they're talking to someone they already know, even if we've literally never met or interacted before. Now, so that's my primary delivery method, but I'm in the process of adding another prong to my content strategy. It's what I'm calling Online Genius Quick Tip videos. These are like 5 to 8 minute long videos. These are directly about the legal stuff. So these are all about legal stuff. And not only are they about legal stuff, but they focus really directly on things related to what I sell. So they are about written agreements and the written agreement, part of business. So, it's things like, why do you need written agreements? Why are they so important? What happens if you don't have written agreements, or what could happen? What do you need to include in written agreements? What are these different, legalese clauses that, a lot of people look at and their eyes glaze over? And what are the different agreements that you need? So think about course agreements and things like that. And what do you include in those, et cetera? So they're meant to be kind of quick hitters. And the idea behind them, there's kind of a lot of advantages to them. Aside from the fact that it's just another touch point, right? It's another way to warm up my audience. It's another piece of value I can give. Again, let's go back. It's something that I can put into the Facebook group, the Facebook community, as added value, right? So if you're part of my Facebook community, you are going to get these extra lessons as an extra benefit. It's just something that you're like, oh, cool. Okay. This is something. And, some of them maybe don't apply to you, right? So if you're not a coach, you're probably not going to spend time watching the quick tip episode that I'll be releasing that's about a coaching agreement, because it doesn't apply to you, right? No big deal. But if you are a coach, having that quick, easily accessible quick tip is useful for you. And so it's value I can add to my community. There's other pieces to it. It's videos that will directly warm people up to my products, right? Because I'm talking about the things I do. I'm talking about the legal templates. Not the templates themselves necessarily, but I'm talking about the agreement that a template could be used to create. So it's valuable for that. They're also great for building audiences on Facebook. So video is a great way to do Facebook advertising. You can promote a video to get video views, and then you can kind of from that build up a warm audience. So kind of a behind the scenes, what I'm doing is I have kind of the first video that I released in the series was all about, why written agreements are the most powerful tool in your arsenal to protect your business. And I actually believe that, to be clear. It's not just a marketing ploy, but I actually believe that. So there was that video, and I'm running ads to that, and I'm going to continue running ads to that. And then as the other videos, quick tip videos, are coming out, I'm then also running ads to that. And partly I'm running those ads to get new people in, but I'm also targeting people who watched the first video about the importance of ads to keep them kind of warm and give them new content that they're seeing. And the idea is that these people then become ideal potential targets when I do my next launch, the template library. So when I come launch time, I'm going to have tens of thousands of people who have watched videos. Hopefully many of those people will have watched multiple of these videos to understand the importance of written agreements, the types of clauses that need to be in there, the types of agreements you need, etc. So if you think about it, I'm warming up a very good audience to potentially sell to in the future. Now, another part of the advantage here is that I can create the videos, because again, videos to me are kind of like wind me up, kind of like this podcast stuff. Actually, they're easier because they're 5 to 8 minutes. These are things that I can, mega batch very easily and create a bunch all at once. And once they're created, I can have a VA, my virtual assistant, create a blog post, to add it to my website. Again, so this gives me a little bit of SEO juice maybe that to my website on topics that I really want people to be coming to my website for. And it gives more content for people to consume who do land on my website, et cetera. And it doesn't take long for me to create it. So a lot of advantages there, a lot of benefits. So this is another place where I'm a bit different than most people. Most people are not going to be doing 2 different categories of content here, like I am, where you're doing a podcast and then a quick tip. That's not normal. Again, most people, if they were going to do a quick tip, would do a quick tip in the exact same medium. They would do a quick tip podcast episode. I chose not to do that because, number one, I wanted the advantage of having a video that I could put on Facebook. And I wanted it to be an actual video where people would see my face. Again, more of this, people are going to know, like, and trust me even more. So it kind of gives me those advantages. But again, let me back up. Most people, if you're not using a Trojan horse strategy in your primary content, you don't have to do this. I mean, you don't have to have a separate set to really warm people up, right? Whereas I do. In a sense, my podcast is a great content. It's content that I love creating, but it's not all the time directly warming up my potential leads to think about buying from me. Well, these quick tip videos will do that more. So again, let's say on the other hand, someone that I enjoy, her podcast that I listen to is Emily Hirsch. She is a Facebook advertising guru. She has an agency that runs Facebook ads for people. You'll remember she was on this podcast. I can't remember the exact episode number. It was in the 20s or 30s somewhere. I'll put a link in the show notes. But she runs an agency and she now has a podcast. And it's at this point so far pretty much all about Facebook advertising. So if you think about it, her podcast is the equivalent of my quick tip episodes, and her podcast episodes are something like 12 or 15 minutes. They're not really long. So she doesn't have to have multiple different types of content because she's talking about what she does and giving people tips and advice, etc., directly on that because it's something that people are going to want to hear about. Another example, is Rick Mulready, who, again, The Art of Paid Traffic, a great podcast if you're interested in paid traffic like Facebook ads, etc. His podcast is largely about what he does. Sometimes he interviews people and walks through and does strategy sessions, but listening to that podcast is in and of itself going to get you to want to do business with him. So he doesn't need a separate piece of content. But because I'm using the Trojan horse strategy, I felt that having a separate prong of content where I'm actually directly talking about what I do, warming people up to that, was an important piece of the puzzle. So that's, again, I'm a bit different than most people. If you're using a Trojan horse strategy, I think you need to think about this as an option and think it through. So that's the how. Now, the final piece that I want to talk about, because we've kind of talked about the big part of how I went through developing the process. But the final part then is thinking through how do we put all the different pieces together? How do they fit together into an overall content strategy? And my friend Jillian Bowen helped me with this. And she used the term loops. And I love that analogy. Now, we're all familiar with the idea of a sales funnel where there's kind of a starting point and an end point. And that's good for a sales strategy, right? There's nothing wrong with that in a promotion period, etc. But it's not a good analogy for content. Your content is not going to be a sales funnel. I mean, some people maybe want to think that way. And maybe for some people there are. Maybe there are some people out there who, quite honestly, their time from lead acquisition to sale is going to be very short, not many touch points, so they can think about it as a funnel. But for the rest of us, I think the idea of thinking of your content as loops is much better. The basic idea behind it is that everything links together and circles back around. It's basically an ecosystem where everything fits together and everything is kind of connecting to itself in a virtuous circle, a virtuous cycle. And so you can come in at any different point and get looped back into the ecosystem. So if you come to the podcast first, if that's where you first hear me, you're going to get looped back in. If you come into the quick tip videos, you're going to get looped back in. If you come into one of my freebies and that's how you first find me, you're going to get looped back in. Now, to me, this way of thinking about my content was especially important when I looked back at my stats. And what I found is that, quite honestly, I can sell kind of single legal templates to people without having to nurture them too much, right? So I can maybe sell a $150 product to someone through a short nurture sequence that looks like a sales funnel. They get a freebie from me, they get some emails, and then, a decent number will buy a product. But people are not going to buy a signature product from me on the legal stuff quickly. I do cold advertising, but what I've found is that quite honestly, things work better after I have nurtured and warmed people up. And what that means is that I need to get them into my ecosystem and get them to start to see the different things and the different pieces here and get to know me. And a looped strategy where everything's looping back, everything's connecting in various ways is an easy way to do that. It gives me so many touch points. It gives me so many chances to deliver value to people that people naturally get to the point that they know, like, and trust me. And if they don't buy, great. I've provided a ton of value to them and I have served my tribe regardless of whether they ever become a customer. But those people are much more likely to become customers at some point in the future when they need it. I frequently talk to people. Literally just yesterday, as I'm recording this, a woman reached out to me after getting part of my nurture sequence at the very beginning and asked me, hey, here's my situation. Do I need it? I said, no, right now you don't. But as you grow, you might. And, I hope, you can learn from it, et cetera. And she, the person, responded and was very happy that I had been honest and frank and said, I can't wait to learn more. And so you can kind of see I'm basically planting seeds now that will pay off later. So let's talk about how this works in practice. Now, in each one of these podcast episodes now, I talk about the community, which is the Where Hub. So I try to get you, anyone who's listening, into my Facebook community. In the community, I link to the podcast and I also link to the freebies at various points. So I try to get people to sign up for various freebies I've got out there. So again, trying to get them on my email list if they're not. Try to get them to listen to the podcast if they're not. So try to do that. So again, you can kind of see I'm linking out and linking back. When someone signs up for any one of my freebies, let's say that's how they enter my world, they get a series of emails through my welcome sequence that links them to the podcast, tells them about it, gives them ideas, talks about some of the more popular ones. They get emails that link back to the community and talk about the importance of community. So that it gives them that. And they get a link back to my free training academy, the Online Genius Academy. So that's kind of what I view as not a starting point freebie, because a lot of people are going to say, I don't want 30 videos to start with, but it's a great resource, right? It's a great resource to link people to, so they have kind of a great grounding in the legal stuff. Then if someone joins the academy, guess what? There are links to the relevant podcast episodes that relate to the topics that we're talking about in that part of the academy. And so you can kind of see how all of the content kind of links back to each other. So every time, you're interacting with me, I'm giving you value, but I'm also telling you, and if you want more value, here's another place to go. And I'm linking them back to another place they can get, value from me. So you're starting to see how it works and how the link or kind of the looped idea is a bit different than kind of a standalone strategy. The idea is to constantly nurture and constantly bring people back. Now, you'll hear people talk about something that I think is kind of similar, but it's in the sales vein, not necessarily in the content vein. A lot of people say if they have a product, a membership, a course, or anything like that they only open the doors to periodically, they will be dropping hints about it and talking about it in their marketing. So they'll do Facebook Lives and they're not directly promoting it, but they'll talk about how so-and-so from the blah, 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 and whatever group it is this. So in my case, it would be saying things like, so-and-so who joined the template library back when I launched it was talking to me about. And so you just kind of drop hints, I guess is what you can say. And so the idea is to get people thinking about it and to get people doing it. I'm not great at that. I'm going to try to work on it. Again, it's a skill you need as a marketer, but there are some people who are just great at it, who just are always dropping hints. And then people are like, hey, what is this? In my case, hey, what's this template library? Tell me more. And then it gives you a way, because they've directly asked you to tell them a bit more and say, oh, it's something I launch every once in a while and it's available. So you just can, tell your customers, tell your audience about these things. So people do it in that context with their products. But I think what's different about the way I've developed my content strategy, again, with big props to my friend Jillian Bowen, who came up with this idea, is that my content strategy is always looping back to other pieces of my free content. So I've got lots of pieces of free content out there, and and it's not just one type of thing. It's not just my podcast. So I'm not just, and you'll see this in this episode. I've referred back to episode 47 to episode 52, and then I didn't remember Emily Hirsch's, but I referred back to that, and there will be a link in the show notes. So there's that piece. But I'm not just looping back to the podcast. I'm looping to my community. I'm looping to my free academy. I'm looping to all of these different pieces of my overall ecosystem of free content, of nurturing content. Because the idea is, we've all heard that notion that people need 7 touch points or whatever it is to before they're going to be willing to do business with you. I don't know what the number is, but I know it's true. The more time that people spend with you, the more they're likely they're going to buy. If someone listens to my podcast every week and is subscribed, is a part of my podcast community, and joins my free, Online Genius Academy, and they haven't bought yet, I'd feel pretty confident that at some point in the future, they will buy something from me. And so you can kind of see that, the more you can really kind of loop people in and get them to consume your content, the better you're going to be. And so that's why I've developed this strategy as I have. That's it. That's the high level. We've walked through it. I hope you've gotten some sense of how you could start constructing your strategy. Maybe you can learn things from this. I can't claim to be perfect. I'm always thinking about ways to tweak and improve. In 2019, I suspect things will change about my content strategy, just because I'm always looking at it and thinking through, should I be doing something better? Should I be improving? Should I be tweaking, etc.? But that's, this episode is the gist of what I'm doing now and what my plans are in the short term. Again, the quick tip videos, I've released 2 now, only on Facebook. I'm working on a website revamp, which I'm going to talk about soon. And so, once that's up, I'm hoping to have them on the website as well. But for now, I'm just starting that strategy. I talked about why I mega batched. I recorded a bunch of them. So I've got those in the can ready to go. I'm just kind of, releasing them on a weekly basis like you should. So again, this is just kind of what I'm doing in a nutshell, but I wanted to give that to you to give you a sense of what I'm doing to help you think through your content strategy. Now, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to tell you I'm going to be stepping away from content creation because it's December, and I don't mean I'm not creating content. I'm going to be creating content. We're not going to be talking about the theme of content creation over the next couple of weeks. Because it's December, it's a time that I'm planning for the new year. And so you need to be planning for the new year. You need to be thinking through, what are you going to do in 2019? So I'm going to walk through my planning process for you in the next couple of episodes. In the next episode, in episode 56, you're going to see me be brutally honest and recap 2018. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? Where did I screw the pooch royally? And then also the things I learned, kind of what are the lessons that I got out of it? So that's what next week's episode is. I am a big believer that you actually need to look back every once in a while to learn lessons in order to move forward. Now, you don't want to dwell on the past, but you need to look back. And I kind of think the end of the year is a natural time to do it. So I do it each year. And I thought, hey, I can do it, privately for myself, but if I share it with you, even the embarrassing parts, even the parts where I screwed up and I took wrong turns, I think that's a good way for me to serve you because it gives you a way to learn things from my mistakes. So you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. And then the week after that, we'll be talking about, okay, let's move past what I learned and talk about what am I thinking going forward for 2019. So that's what's on tap. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Hope you're enjoying the show. If so, I hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And then if you'll also give a rating and review and share the episodes with other people who you think you could use it, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, don't forget to join the Online Genius community by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. Hey, there are those loops again. Like I said, you're going to keep hearing that because that's obviously an important part of my strategy. But That's it for this week's episode. I'll see you back here next week for episode 56 of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.